All right, folks, good afternoon and welcome to Recovery Live. You may have joined us previously when this event was sponsored by SAMHSA's Bringing Recovery Supports to Scale Technical Assistance Center Strategy, or Brass Tacks for short. But the Brass Tacks project ended after a 9-year run on September 4th. What did not end, however, was C4 Innovation's strong commitment to supporting and advancing recovery and recovery supports. C4 Innovations is now sponsoring Recovery Live, and we will continue to bring top-tier speakers, interesting and challenging issues, and creative strategies and knowledge that will help peers and non-peers alike in improving the lives of others with information needed by the field to do the very best job possible in actually delivering those recovery supports and services. Now, as I mentioned, C4 Innovations operated the SAMHSA Brass Tack project for 9 years, from 2011 to 2020. And we at C4 Innovations, or C4 for short, we're committed to advancing recovery, wellness, housing stability for people who are marginalized. We are also committed to reducing disparities and achieving equitable outcomes. And we engage, support, and partner with service organizations, with communities, systems to develop and implement research-based, evidence-based solutions that are person-centered, recovery-oriented, and trauma-informed. You can learn more about the work C4 does by visiting our website at c4innovates.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube if you're so inclined. Now, I mentioned earlier that C4 and Recovery Live events work to bring you top-tier experts and speakers to provide input and expertise on a variety of different topics. Well, folks, today is absolutely no exception, and we are frankly beyond fortunate to have some amazing presenters with us today. And they're going to be talking about supporting resilience and recovery during hard times. Quite a timely topic. And I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters. First, we start with Kristen Harper, who is a recovery specialist for C4 Innovations. She is also a project AMP implementation coordinator. Kristen, can you give a wave? Fantastic. We also have Juan Velez-Court, and Juan is a peer support specialist coordinator with the Mental Health and Anti-Addiction Services Administration of Puerto Rico. Juan, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Theopia Jackson, who is the chair of Clinical Psychology degree program at Saybrook University. Theopia, give us a wave. Thank you. All right, we're bringing up a poll right now just to find out more about who's in the room with us, and please feel free to respond to this poll. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Recovery Live as you do that. So these events, Recovery Live events, are really interactive, and you engage directly with the presenters and each other through a live chat box. And as you can see, we're going to have you answer a couple of cool audience poll questions. The presenters are going to share some of their initial thoughts around this topic, and then they're going to answer questions that all of you raised during this event. Now, you are all in listen-only mode, and you can, however, introduce yourselves. You can ask questions, you can share ideas, you can place resources, whatever you want to do in the chat box. You can also let us know about any tech difficulties that might be arising for you, and just type them in the chat box if you can, if you're so able to do that, and one of our tech support will be right with you. To access the chat, click the word chat on your screen, and that chat box is actually going to pop out. You can resize it if you want. You can click it and drag it to the side, and it'll stay on the top, but it'll kind of stay out of the way of the other content that is going to be presented. Our event today is going to last approximately 1 hour, and it is being recorded. That link from the recording is going to be shared with every person who registered after this event. Excuse me. Now, if you're listening to this content and you feel like your organization might need some technical assistance or some training around this or any other topic, please just email us at training@c4innovates.com. And we're happy to discuss your needs. We'll brainstorm some strategies and possible solutions. And honestly, we'll just work together with you to determine the best technical assistance possible to meet your individual needs. All right, let me stop here for just a second and take a look at the poll results. So what we have is, in terms of what is your role, uh, person in recovery, it's about 31%. That's fantastic. Peer support workers, I love seeing that. And substance abuse, or excuse me, substance use disorder and or mental health counselor, about the same, 34%. We have either a physician, psychologist, or nurse, a professional sort of clinical staff. Staff supervisors are here. That's fantastic. Those folks are often decision makers. Program managers and executive directors, there's 10% of folks are here. Those are decision makers, and it's fantastic to have them here. We've got 6 or 7 state employees and policymakers, again, more decision makers. Always love to see law enforcement here. And then we've got a couple of students, looks like some educators, students and researchers. And then there's about 20 folks who just declare themselves as other, and they're here for a variety of reasons. So just happy that you all participated in the poll. There'll be one more poll further down as we move through this event today. But thank you all for taking a moment to make that happen. And I can see folks introducing themselves in the chat. That's fantastic. Happy to see that. And we're going to continue to participate with you in that chat. And again, if you need anything from tech support, please let us know there. Also, make sure if you've got questions for the presenters, pop them right in there as well, and we'll be pulling them out and handing them off to the presenters as we move into that Q&A period. All right, so enough of listening to me blabber. I'm going to give you what you all are here for. And Kristen, will you start us off and take it away for us? Kristen, you're on mute.
I'm glad I asked. I asked you if you could give me a thumbs up if you could hear me, and obviously you couldn't hear me, so there was no thumbs up. So hi, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here. My name's Kristen Harper. I'm a person living in long-term recovery from substance use disorder, mental health issues, eating disorder, and a sexual assault survivor, and just could not be more honored to present with Juan, Ethiopia, and Stephen and have these conversations. When we were prepping for this particular Recovery Live, I think some of our meetings actually turned into direct support for each other in a way, and so I'm just really grateful for that. So, this first slide, 2020, I mean, what the heck, right? There's just no other way to frame this year so far. Been in recovery for almost 20 years now. I can't believe that just came out of my mouth, but I have to say that this year has been particularly challenging for a lot of different reasons for me. And so when this topic got brought up, I actually just wanted to attend, not actually participate as a panelist, but the universe had different plans for me. So it gave me an opportunity to really kind of take stock of what has been helping me over the course of this year, especially. This very first quote that we wanted to share with you all, this is an early on conversation I had at the start of my recovery. I was really afraid to be vulnerable and very afraid to let people in and ask for help. And whatever the mindset is, and those of us that are in long-term abstinence-based recovery of not asking for help, or after you get 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or how many years you have, or whatever amount of recovery you have, there's this facade that I think we start to put up, and it sometimes feels like it's not okay to not be okay. And I think that we just need to go ahead and put it out there that it is okay to not be okay, especially this year. And a lot of folks are struggling and having a difficult time figuring out our bearings. And so I have to say that, everyone that is on a recovery journey, myself included, we have all figured out ways to remain on that journey, and sharing those today with each other and talking about those, as well as looking for some new resources, I think is going to be really critical. I have fallen back to some of my older coping mechanisms, I have to say, during the COVID pandemic. I certainly have indulged a little bit more with some of my brownies and cookies and some of those. Other things I have in my not so healthy coping toolbox would be, spending a little too much time on social media, getting into debates, those types of things. I was really fortunate at the beginning of the shutdown here. I found out that I was pregnant. So I've also been having to manage pregnancy on top of isolation and the pandemic and everything else that's going on in our country right now. And to be honest with y'all, it's been exhausting. It's been very, very challenging. And some days I just, tell folks at work, I'm here, but I just need you to give me some space. Other days I find that having a purpose and, really diving deep into work has been super helpful for me. So we're going to talk about some of these additional challenges that I'm sure some of you are experiencing, and then also some resources that we have found that have worked. I'm more excited about having an interactive discussion with my fellow panelists and look forward to really kind of being inspired by them as well, because they are awesome people. Next slide. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over now to my friend Juan, and look forward to hearing what you say, Juan.
First of all, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Stephen, for the wonderful introduction for everybody. Thank you to Kristen for being vulnerable with everybody, and the previous slide where Kristen mentioned it's okay to not be okay. I think it's important that, when we're talking about resilience, just by us, all of us being here right now, we're showing that we're resilient. So instead of opening up with anything else, I just want to start by saying thank you. And that's thank you to all of the people in chat. Thank you to all of the panelists, because we as people in recovery, we are resilient by showing up, by being here. And we don't always have to be well, because nobody's lives is perfect, right? It's very important to recognize that we're living in very challenging times. My name is Juan Velas Court. I am from Puerto Rico. I'm a person with lived experience regarding childhood trauma, a variety of different mental health challenges, but none of that defined who I became, right? We all recognize the trauma. We all recognize the stigma that surrounds substance use challenges, all of these different things that are happening around the world. Yet everybody in here, just by once again showing up, we're making a change. We're making a difference. And the reason that this slide is here on screen, it's let's not be quick to judge others. We don't know what's going on in their lives. With everything that's happening right now in regards to racism, lack of opportunities, the uncertainty of the future, we can sit here and talk about tomorrow, and we don't know what's going to happen today in the evening, right? And maybe when we are on our very best, we can easily just brush that to the side and it doesn't affect us. But what happens now when every single day it's a brand new challenge? That's when we recognize everything that we've learned throughout our road to recovery. And this is the time where we put it into practice. I can sit here as a proud son, as a proud husband, as a proud homeowner, and the fact that I did not think I would ever accomplish that previously in my life. And now that we're in a pandemic and so many other things happening in our lives, and we'll be talking about throughout this afternoon, I can sit here and go to bed and saying, you know what? I don't feel emotionally excellent. I don't feel safe about the future, but I'm showing up. I'm making a difference. And this is where I put into action everything that I've learned throughout my life. The pandemic to me, because I can talk about my recovery, not the recovery of others, right? The pandemic to me is the chance. It's like, Juan, your whole life has led to this moment. Now you're an adult, you have responsibilities, you have so many things to go through. Be proud of every day you cry, of every day you celebrate. And when we're vulnerable with one another, not judging, because I can be smiling on the outside, but feel miserable on the inside, and that's fine. Let's normalize the conversations so we can have about just how we feel without having to judge one another. And throughout this afternoon, we are going to continue having these different conversations about what's helping us, because Kristen mentioned the brownies. I mean, I would like to say maybe I've had a donut or two more than I probably should have, but I've been able to step out of my comfort zone throughout the pandemic, because maybe, I'm in Puerto Rico. We've been in lockdown since March. So maybe March, May, June, all of that, I'm like, I'm good to go. This is not affecting me. I just celebrated my birthday on September 13th, right? And last year I had a big birthday party, but this year I celebrated with my mother and my wife. And I was able to be thankful in the fact that I celebrated that. I could have easily sat here and gone, who knows what could have happened. And the fact that, and thank you for the birthday wishes, by the way. And you know why that's important before we take it to our next excellent resource? I know for a fact, after talking to so many incredible leaders in the community, it can be very hard to celebrate things for ourselves because we think of the road ahead, but we don't necessarily recognize everything we've overcome. And doing something as simple as celebrating a birthday, it doesn't matter about who, because it can just be with yourself. It's that friendly reminder that we've grown. We have more information, we have more education, and it's that unbelievable power that we can have to not just heal ourselves, but also heal others and celebrate whatever is happening in our lives. Because as Kristen mentioned, it's 2020, people. We got to celebrate every little thing that we can, because that is what motivates us and others. So if you could please move on over to the following slide. Now I would like to take it over to Ethiopia Jackson. I had the privilege of like what Kristen mentioned. We had a meeting in preparation for this, and I barely know Ethiopia aside from our meetings. And the first thing I said is, can I just bring you over to Puerto Rico? So take it away, Ethiopia.
I am so ready to go. First and foremost, what a blessing and treat to be among you, not only this phenomenal panel that I have the pleasure of being part of, but as I've been bearing witness to the comments, this is beautiful. And I want to underscore what Juan has shared in terms of appreciating this community, those of you who are in fact in recovery and how you understand your own recovery, and just appreciating that that is resilience. And more specifically, I would submit that you, better than anyone else, is already prepared to deal with the unique situation that we're sitting in, because you have experienced your own internal and hopefully collective strength and well-being. So let me just add a couple of contexts for who I am and how I am blessed to be here. So as a licensed mental health practitioner, I have not directly worked with folks around their recovery. However, like any other human being, I have family members who are in recovery and those who are still struggling with their own addictions. So let's keep this real and humanized. That's what I love about the conversations that Recovery Live hosts, first and foremost, is that level of realism. And as my dear colleagues Juan and Kristen have already shared in their own professional disclosure, that they have dealt with and are still dealing with issues beyond the recovery. There are other things that happen, other traumas, if you will. And you'll see me being a little hesitant sometimes with the terms trauma and recovery because, resilience, because I'm not so sure they fully get it. When I think about what each of my colleagues have already shared in just my own lived experiences, the word resilience doesn't quite get it for me. It doesn't feel deep enough, because in some ways we should not still be here given what we came through. So for the brilliance on the line, I need someone to come with a more representative term than resilience for the depth of essence and spiritness and complexities of what you've had to go through to be where you are. And for those professionals who have been gifted to work with people who are on their own journeys, what you bore witness to, I think you might submit that the term resilience just is not enough. So I want to honor that too. What I also want to add to the conversation as you look at this particular slide is that how we use our language is imperative. Language has power. It can define a setting or it can undermine a setting. And that's why I do appreciate the shift in our professional world from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. Because many times people are in situations that inform their behavior. So something I love to say is that what we perceive to be a problematic behavior sometimes is a normal response to an abnormal situation. So my dear Kristen, as you have tapped back into your beautiful sweets, good for you, because you're in an abnormal situation. And that could in fact now be a healthy coping, whereas in another point in time in your life, you may have perceived it to be something that's not as helpful. So what I'm trying to offer here is that we are much more than, a quote, the label in front of us. The other importance when I think about strength-based approaches and the power of language is moving away from saying anyone is, quote, at risk. Instead, it is more about people are at potential in at-risk environments, because in doing so, it should foster more curiosity about what's going on in the environment and what do I need to know about that if I'm going to be of support to the person who's journeying, and also what does the person need to know about their environment as they're trying to define their own journey. So we are all sitting in a unique equalizer. This COVID has humbled all of us to let us know in the first real time that those of us who call ourselves professionals or healers or doing the work, if you will, we are intimately experiencing the same trauma and the same situation that those who we are supposedly helping are experiencing. So that's a unique place to be thinking about. So again, we just kind of say that clearly, that those of us who are in the, quote, helping role, and I say quote because I'm not so sure that's the best way to label us, and those who are, quote, being helped, we're experiencing the same situation. So as a humanistic psychologist, what I might say is this event is reminding all of us, even those who are professionals, that the human experience is the situations that we find ourselves in, and then how do we tap into the human spirit to move forward. And when I say spirit is more complex than the religious practices and beliefs, because that is the manifestation of our spirit. But if all of our work allowed us to tap into the spirit of the person, then we'll be able to better soldier with them in their own journey. And I just want to close with a couple more comments. If I can keep going on, I promise, and I won't do this. This is what happens when you put a professor at the front of things here, and I have a lot to say in this space. But I just want to close with one more comment, which is we talk a lot about the person moving through their recovery. And what I'm drawn to as I'm getting more acclimated to the work that's being done here around Recovery Live and your approach to strength work is we should be more intentional about fostering a circle of care, which is more complex than a circle of support. A circle of support means I'm going to leave some food at your door in the midst of the COVID, which is of itself extremely valuable and important. But what is a circle of care? It's that and more. It is what we're doing here now. So I want to commend that these Recovery Live conversations is part of the circle of care. It is part of the healing. It is part of the coping conversations. And so if you think about who is in and who should be in your circle of care and whose circle you should be in, I think that those who have journeyed through into their world of recovery will have lots of lessons to give to us and also be loved in it. So I want to give a shout out because I saw 4 letters in here. Darcy, thank you for capitalizing it, because this is a love thing. As a member of the Association of Black Psychologists, we've been trying to be much more intentional to recover our African language and knowledge and pull it forward. We have shifted this COVID time into something called Zola up on us. And the term Zola, we've been taught, is in fact a unique type of love. It's an activating love. It's a protective love. It's an energized love. So I will close here gifting this to say, how do we Zola up on all of us in this time as we support each other's recovery and also promote and foster the recovery of our society from all the isms it's dealing with, particularly in terms of this COVID and the racial unrest. And so thank you for allowing me to be part of this conversation and to learn with and from.
Wow, you guys. Wow. I have been doing Recovery Live for years now, and this is just an incredible and uplifting and motivating and encouraging conversation from Kristen, from Juan, and from Ethiopia, I'm almost speechless because for the first time in a long time, I have this weird feeling inside me, and I think it might be like joy. And it's been so long since I've felt joy. But this is why I said earlier, these are we strive to bring top tier people, and yes, this is all of the folks here are top tier professionals. But as I said in the chat, more importantly, they are top tier, just darn good people. And it is a humbling honor, I mean it, to just come to work with folks like Juan and Ethiopia and Kristen every day. I'm so grateful. And I want to jump into some Q&A because I know that there are a number of questions that are out there. And I want to help us kind of get right into that. So I'm going to start with a way for all of you to start kind of offering some suggestions in the chat as I pose this, okay? And then I'm going to just ask the panelists to chime in on some of these questions. So the first one is well, you know what? Before I get there, let me do something else. Let me drop in the final poll. I was going to hold off on that a little bit, but while you're seeing this poll, because this is really the direction we're heading in, right? What are you grateful for from this pandemic? And so as you all spend some time just responding to the poll, let me throw this out to the panelists. And I don't care who goes first, but if one of you could just start sharing, what are you grateful for in the middle of this pandemic?
If I may, I would love to jump in because
absolutely.
And let me contextualize it. Sitting as the chair of a academic graduate degree program, sitting as the president of the Association of Black Psychologists, and sitting as a mother, wife, at this unique time in our history is extremely daunting. And where I find my joy and my blessings to be quite clear are moments like this. This reaffirms me. And if I can be so bold, when we are faced with such real threats, physically, emotionally, spiritually, economically, knowing that communities like this exist sustains me one more time. It helps me get up off my knees one more time and lift my head up. So thank you for this space. I say that genuinely because right now I don't go anywhere if it's not feeding me too. That's a promise to myself. And so this feeds me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethiopia. I was going to just add to that I don't really know when I figured this out in my recovery, but it was early on. I had a couple of experiences with just a life circumstance that I got this feeling in my chest that connected to my head, and it just felt like I was plugged in to something bigger than me, maybe the universe, a spiritual connection, whatever you want to call it. And over the years, I have broadened that, and that has been really critical for me. I get that feeling sometimes with my daughter when we're just playing. That has been very helpful this year. I also can get that feeling through some of the anti-racism work that I'm doing, some of the political activism that I do, education, if I'm taking a course of any kind, conversations like this, I for sure get that feeling. I don't really know what to call it except just that sense of connectedness. And I think that when I am struggling the most with my recovery is when I feel isolated and disconnected. And for me, having a purpose is directly attached to that connectedness. So if I feel like I am getting fed, but then also have an opportunity to serve or to participate or just to hold space for somebody, I also feel like I get that sort of connectedness. And Other tools, that have helped me feel like that, of course, over the years, I've used one-on-one therapy, I've used mutual aid support, exercise, yoga, meditation for sure. But I've learned that I have to kind of assess myself every once in a while, because I get burnt out on the same old stuff. And I have to keep it fresh. I have to keep me green. And I have to keep looking for things that will help me get that feeling of connectedness.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And in my case, I love that you mentioned the topic of connectedness, because in Puerto Rico, we went into lockdown before any state did. So I remember we were actually going to open up a peer support center. I'm in a meeting on a Friday. My boss writes to me, Puerto Rico shutting down that same Friday. And then on Monday, I'm at home thinking, what's going to happen? Because peer support, everything that we do is based on connection. And we understand that a lot of things got taken away, right? And I was thinking of not just like from a peer support director, or like we can talk about all these fancy terms. What's benefited me is being part of support groups, just being able to have conversations about people. And I knew that if I was going through that, and I've been privileged enough to obtain a lot of access to information, I knew that I had to be proactive. So the thing that I've been very grateful for during the time of pandemic is recognizing and realizing that we not only have the power to promote, but make change. So in Puerto Rico, we started, for example, facilitating virtual support groups, reaching out to organizations, letting you matter, because we know what it's like to be immediately forgotten, and we are minimized because everybody's going through something. But that doesn't magically mean that my anxiety, my depression, my obsessive compulsive disorder, these intrusive thoughts, they don't magically go on vacation, right? If anything, they can become gradually worse if I don't have my healthy support system, if I don't have access to going to gym and doing so many other things. So being able to provide virtual support groups has been incredibly beneficial. Realizing that there's a lot of questions about ECPR and chat, that's something that benefited me, because I had to realize that even though I did a lot of great things for my wellness and my recovery, I wanted more, because I didn't know how long this was going to last. And I knew that other people could be going through similar situations. ECPR is designed to assist people emotionally, not with the intent of solving problems, but with the intent of having heart-to-heart conversations. Because a lot of times, we can talk about evidence-based practices and many other things, but at the core, people want to talk from the heart to the heart. People want to know that there's an intellectual component that we all know is beautiful. We all know it's powerful. But if we don't connect emotionally, if we don't connect spiritually, then the other person may be afraid to be vulnerable. They may be afraid to open up, because I knew that I was like that as well. So ECPR is an entire process where people can have these very specific conversations to identify our emotions. Once again, not with the intent of solving anything. More often than not, we are so afraid to be vulnerable out of the fear of being judged. So being able to express how I feel, how I would love to feel, why I feel this way, without anybody trying to solve my life, without anybody trying to heal me, without anybody trying to be above me, and just being with me in the way that I need, is something that I realized not only did I need, but I was able to sit here with a lot of clinical providers that so many times they told us, Juan, we're the first responders, and we're focusing on the community. I'm a mother, I'm a father, and the stigma for a mental health provider to be open up about their mental health challenges that they're going through, all of a sudden, we as peer support specialists became the experts in many times, because we know what it's like. We've been going through all of this. And I think ECPR, RAP, wellness plans, and not being afraid to just attempt other things, even if they don't work, right? It's just not being afraid to step out of my comfort zone has been incredibly positive for me.
So Stephen, if I have your permission, there was 2 points that was put in the chat room I'd like to try to briefly respond to. One was from Calvin, the other is from Randy. Is it okay if I do that very quickly? Beautiful, thank you. So I want to appreciate Calvin, who brought in, and of course the thread is gone because the things move so fast, but who was posing a question around a balancing of and appreciating positivity, but also needing to still underscore the risk issues there. And I wanted to offer one, so I agree with that, but I wanted to offer another clarifying comment, particularly to make sure I've communicated clearly. When I'm talking about strength-based approaches, it's much more complex than positivity. What I'm suggesting here is that understanding the strengths, what has truly helped somebody get from point A to point B, even in their addiction, what still kept them alive, right? And what even helped them to get to a space of being ready, if you will, for lack of a better word, for their own recovery and engaging. I think that's, for me, those types of critical conversations, regardless of whatever the problem is or their issue is, we have to do a really good job of understanding what those strengths are, because in doing so, it gives us the baseline to see the problems, to name the real risk out there. I think I bring this up because most times in healthcare fields, we are overly trained to see all the problems. We can find a problem in a heartbeat. Give me 2 minutes with somebody and I can list all the problems. But what we're not as trained to see is their strength. So when I mention strength-based approaches, I'm asking for something more complex than positivity. I'm really asking for a major shift in the core connection. And I hope that helps Calvin, because I do agree with you, Calvin. I'm not trying to minimize or discount the realities of the risk in the situation. I'm just putting them, I hope, in a context that allows for more empowerment and move it forward. And then the second comment, and I'll give it back to my colleagues to join in as well, is when I believe it was Randy who talked about trying to pay attention to languaging during this time. And I want to salute you for that, because the focus on, I've heard people say locked down, or say this is, think about that if you're locked down, right? And all the imagery that can conjure up in terms of being restricted. But I wonder, and I want to offer this to you, Randy, in support of what you were trying to do. Languaging that we've tried to adopt is more about safe distance engagement. Because again, that distance engagement is intentional, because we're actually saying to our families, if we're trying to ground them culturally, is that this is an opportunity to become more culturally aware and connected. What it would be like to have family conversations about history, things that's not given to us in our textbook or not out there coming at us all the time. And then I'll close with also, we created something called Sheltering in Place, which is a workbook that's really intended to help communities of color, particularly people of African ancestry, learn and talk about who they are from a culturally affirming place in the midst of all this madness. So just want to add that out there, Tim.
Good.
And that's a very powerful thing. And adding to that, I think that the pandemic and everything that's happened is, even when the term social distancing came out, and I'm seeing a lot of people in chat, that was highly debated, because if anything, we need to be more socially active. It's just maybe physically speaking, yeah, there's some barriers, but we can sit here and have this conversation because we've had that experience. But for somebody that maybe needs that social component, I knew a lot of people that have never had panic attacks or anxiety, and all of a sudden they're breaking down because they're seeing just like social distancing. You can't be with this person, as opposed to why? As opposed to, let's have a healing conversation of, at least in Puerto Rico and many places, it wasn't up until many months after that I began seeing like, maybe we should change this because of this. And I think that presents the challenge when it comes to mental health, that sometimes people take immediate actions without recognizing that there's a lot of people that are already at risk, that are already with all of these different challenges. Because I knew that I have a home. I bought my home in December. So my thought was like, can I pay my house? And then I'm expected to work while paying the house, while like asking my wife, like, hey, will you still have a job? Because what does this look like right now? But that doesn't mean all of the other things are going away. So I think having that sensibility and realizing that our language is very important, and it's something that's going to vary state by state. I know for a fact that we could ask, what does X or Y word mean for somebody here. And in the chat, we have people from over 20, 30 states, and it's going to be different. But it's recognizing that, at least in my community, in my culture, these words are things that are more of a threat rather than just a random word that you can say. Because when we heard lockdown, most of the people that I work with have also been incarcerated. And for them, it was very challenging. And many times we were immediately invalidated. It's the term. It's like, just because it is what it is, it doesn't mean we have to be okay with it. It's about proposing, and as opposed to that, what can we say that's more healing for people?
Yeah. And I think that another piece of this too, with the recovery community specifically, is so many of us have experienced incarceration or involuntary admittance into institutions, in my case, or, other ways that we've had to really overcome, which is how we build resilience, right? Or the skills, whatever we're calling it. Ethiopia, I love your point about that. Resilience is not powerful enough to really be broken and come back stronger. And I think that, this is a really great example this year of the recovery community having the skills, knowing what we need to do, because we've kind of done it, right? So most of our lives, and had to stop and restart so many times. So I think that that's also something to just kind of keep in mind. And then the other thought I had too, when y'all were sharing, I knew I was going to get inspired by you both, thank you, was this idea of just remembering this is not permanent, right? This is not a permanent state that we're in. And that in-between place, or that transition period, it's messy, it's scary, it's confusing. I think about the caterpillar that dies in the cocoon before it can become a butterfly. And we're sort of in that cocoon period, is what I feel like right now. And as we're moving through that transitional stage, there's a lot of opportunity within the universe for personal growth. And I think that that's another element of resiliency, is how can we stay optimistic? How can we find the positive in the situation and find purpose? And that seems to be helping me lately.
I could just let the three of you continue. It's just phenomenal, folks. And just a quick couple of comments just from the moderator here before I read out this, kind of the results of this poll. But anytime I hear the term resilience, I'm formerly incarcerated. I spent a couple of years in prison, and I'm certainly a person with lived experience. But anytime I hear the term resilience, particularly when it's applied to me, it usually tells me that something bad has come my way, and that I'm going to be somehow expected to overcome it because I'm resilient. And I have kind of bumped up against feeling really frustrated, I think, with that terminology, because frankly, if I never hear somebody call me resilient again, I probably would be pretty happy. So I wanted to share that, and I did see, Randy, something in the chat about you as a person who has incarceration in your background. Hearing lockdown is triggering. It absolutely is for me as well. But I, let me offer you a different take on this too. One of the most amazing things that I think I've realized as I have been sheltering in place or locked down in my own home is that much of the time that I was incarcerated was spent very similarly. And so I had learned how to occupy my time in one location with one group of people for extended periods of time. And so there is some, oh gosh, I hate to use this word, resilience in the fact that some of us with those histories of incarceration are actually pretty well conditioned to endure what we are doing and still maintain some hope and some dignity and some encouragement for others. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out. And let me talk just a minute about the poll questions, which, if any of these supports you rely on, sorry, it's written a little different. Spending time with family or friends, look, almost everybody said that, 81%. Spending time in nature, that's a big one for me as well. That nature and my pets, and it's 65%. Exercise, about half of you are finding some, some support through your exercising. About 30% of us are looking at therapy and counseling. 23% looking at mutual aid support groups and just sharing, whether that's virtual or in person. There's a group of folks, about 20%, that are using other support groups. I love this one, especially given that we've been talking about donuts and sweets and stuff. Better nutrition. I don't know how anybody's pulling that off in the middle of all this, but kudos to you for that. Spirituality, absolutely. 64% of the folks here are relying on that. And then art, music, and other creative pursuits. It's a way to take our minds off the immediacy of the challenges that are in front of us. And I absolutely get that. That comes in right at 50%. So it makes a lot of sense. And then participation in faith-based communities. And again, about 25% of the folks that were here are doing that. So, I wanted to share that because it's a way for folks to think about, what else is out there for me to be able to do in support of myself and support of others, and to get through, frankly, the most challenging and unprecedented times. I'm 60 years old, and I've never seen my country like this. So, just being able to have some different ways to manage the angst and the tension and the challenges that are going on, I think it's really, really important. You want to say something, Theo?
Of course I do. I do. I'm trying to think. I'm giving myself great pride for pacing well. But I did want to respond to your sharing and also Kristen's in terms of how it further lets us explicate this idea of the shift of generally embracing a strength-based approach. Because you're right, there's ways in which certain populations, like those who are in recovery or those who are formerly incarcerated or those who've been experiencing racism, that we are almost glorified for our resilience. But let's be very clear. Resilience means your ability to get back up. I don't want to be resilient. Stop kicking me down. Get your knee off my neck. And I won't have to be resilient anymore. I can just be. So, and also there's something about that languaging. Sometimes, not always there, but there's something about that languaging that others, right? So you're the resilient one as if I'm not, right? If we go back to what I said before, those of us who are doing this work are experiencing the work. We're not separate from the communities in which we serve. I think that's the Western training that we've been taught, that I and others are trying to make a shift from, particularly humans and psychology. The only difference between you and I, if I'm serving in this licensed role, is supposedly I have something I think I know, but it means nothing if I don't turn it over to you to examine. Other than that, we are the same. So you've affirmed me that the term resilience is still limited. And more specifically, we as professionals who think we know something need to humble ourselves and critically ask ourselves, where is our resilience or the lack thereof? And what is our role in fostering our own resilience and naming our own problems? And then something that Kristen shared that I thought was also deeply important for me to sort of underscore is this reality that we are not only just contending in this space, but we are in transformation. When we move through this, like I'm not comfortable with the term new normal, because that is a fallacy in of itself, right? It is that we are going to become who and how we need to be. Because the COVID, Mother Nature said, look, y'all not listening to me. So let me sit all your butts down, okay? I'm gonna equalize it completely. So everybody, I don't care how much money you got, notoriety, politics, no money, whatever, you're all sitting down. So we can either take this opportunity to genuinely regroup and be intentional in how we want to move forward, or let the history books say that we played a role in our own demise, because we have mastered this virtual world. We clearly understand that we can be in person in multiple ways. So just because someone says COVID is over, and I'll be very clear, I will not be the first one in line for a vaccination. So all y'all go play with that first for a while, and then I'll know if I'm gonna do it. But my point is, this is not an either or situation. It should forever be a both and. We should always embrace the how we can master connection and spiritness in person as well as at a distance. And I just want to kind of add that because it just kind of got stirred for me as I listened to both. And I'll close with this last one, which is, if we truly understand this strength-based approach, then this community is no longer, because when people say recovery, I can already hear there's a certain level of judgment, right? So what I'm saying is, excuse me, but you are not the problem. You are the evidence of the solution. So those who think we know should be saying, how did they recover and what can I learn from that? Thank you. I'm going to stop talking now. Woo.
Thank you so much. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, and you just reminded me too, one of the things that I have been most concerned about this year is my friends that are dying and the people that we're working with overdosing at rates that are just almost 2017 rates again. Suicides are just off the chain right now. And I think that that's something that particularly those of us helping field, whatever we want to call it, that are serving others, we have to find somewhere to process that. And right now, I don't feel like that has been talked about, is the heal the healers type mentality. What are we doing to support each other? How can we hold each other up and help process some of these really painful deaths that we've encountered this year, including the COVID deaths, you know?
No, and I wanted to chime in on that as well. And first of all, Ethiopia, like I said it then, and I'll say it again. I am a big fan of your words. You're an incredibly inspiring person, so thank you for that. And when you were talking about resilience, I think a lot of people, and I saw that in chat, when it comes to like the stigma and discrimination that comes with like mental health and substance use challenges, some people use the word resilient as a fancy way of like, oh my goodness, you're not weak. You know, it's used with like this connotation of like, look at you, look at how you're alive, right? And that is a sign of you're inferior to me, yet despite of that, you're doing okay. And people don't realize how harmful that can be, because as opposed to what? Like, what are we working towards? If we are working towards empowering people, recovery is nothing new, right? And I've said this in multiple forums. I'm 31 years old. I was diagnosed at 7 years old. If up until this point nobody believed in me and empowered me and gave me opportunities, that would have been a problem. Thankfully, I was provided forums, but for every Juan or Ethiopia or Stephen or Kristen, how many people are still dying by suicide or still dying from overdoses because nobody's giving them an opportunity to make mistakes, to be successful in life? Something that I think that can be very healing, because I'm seeing a lot of conversations in chat about this is happening. And what Kristen mentioned, you know, it's so true, which is, where are we having these conversations for us that we are seen as the leaders? But right now, the leader to me is anybody that can promote a healthy outcome. That to me is a leader by default, right? So one of the things is recognizing our limits, because if we take a trauma-informed approach, we can look at 2018, 2019, and 2020 and realize that the standard of our level of tolerance has dramatically gone down because of everything we've gone through. We are a lot more frustrated now on September 24th, 2020 than we were on September 24th, 2019. So I can't expect to have the same conversation with everybody and expecting to have the same level of tolerance, because we, as part of a recovery community, we get exhausted. We get tired of saying, hello, we are here. We can be part of the solution, but you got to give us a shot.
You
give
are
us
the
an
solution.
Opportunity to be here. Exactly.
You are the
and
solution.
then exactly. And then what happens when I remember when we closed down, a lot of people were surprised that a lot of people in recovery were receiving online services, but it was with this connotation of like, oh, look at them, you know, they're doing so well. It's like, hey, guess what? You know, I didn't leave my home for 7 years out of like severe depression. So in my case, when Puerto Rico shut down, I was like, hey, my life kind of prepared me for this. So we can't just assume that everybody is like, fits this very one size fits all approach. And then the other thing is to have everything that we do, in addition to practicing mindfulness. I think something that's been very helpful for me and in the virtual support groups that we're doing is give every single thing that you have a purpose or an intention. Something as simple as like, right now, I'm having a very powerful conversation with all of you in the same place that I was watching a Netflix series. I was watching Cobra Kai the other day in the exact same place, right? And this is something that was not the normal. Like, this was not traditional. So I need to recognize that there's an emotional component to this room in my house now that did not exist before. I can have a support group meeting here in the same place that I can meet with my boss, in the same place that I can be checking out some recipes on YouTube. So think of all of the emotions that I experience on this same chair. So something as healthy as like, hey, when I'm in this room, I'm going to have this type of lighting, this type of atmosphere. I'm going to light up a candle if it makes this environment feel better. If I'm going to have a more uncomfortable or emotionally a draining conversation, maybe I don't do that here. Because when I do sit here, this is my space, right? Like, this is my place here. And it's something that we don't have to rely on others. And of course, not everybody has 20 different spaces in their home, but something as simple as changing a light bulb, something as simple as changing a chair, something we can all do right now, literally right now. And it's not going to solve any problems, but it's going to make us like 2% more capable of overcoming all these challenges.
I think you're brilliant. As you can see, for both what you're hearing and what I'm seeing in the chat room, that we are among brilliance. This is brilliance. And when you were speaking, both Kristen and Juan, what it was reminding me of, which is part of this shift once again, is we should be very intentional of knowing when our more difficult moments are going to emerge. And I would submit to you that this upcoming election has been positioned to do just that. Regardless of your belief systems, regardless how you vote, I think that there is something that we can collectively remind ourselves to be even more intentional around our grace and self-care and forgiveness for self and others as we approach that, because the world is stepping more into madness. Kristen, and you're right on. And I remember, Juan sharing this story in our prep calls, which is in our professional spaces and places. If you're calling yourself the healer, the helper, the therapist, whatever, we have to get real so that when we say things like, oh, you're in recovery, you're right, Juan, something about that sometimes feels dismissive. And I would submit to you that it's more about the speaker than about you. Because sometimes when you're sitting in this, quote, professional role, we have not been taught how to integrate who we are as human beings in the professional role we're in. So by acknowledging your resilience somehow might distance me from recognizing I have some wounds or some spaces in me that still needs to be helped, because right now I have on the coat of the expert. But if we could, as the experts, as the Western trained folks and whatever our disciplines are, if we could be so bold as to take off that coat and and as I said, take our science, our knowledge, and put it next to our humanness, our humanity, it should allow for us to have real talk conversations in our own spaces around, you know what, I'm working with Juan and he's doing great work, but I have to tell you guys, I need a little bit more help because I feel myself being hurt by whatever. Or we got to have real talk as real people and not just, I'm the professional, so how is Juan doing in recovery and what are you doing to help him? No, what's coming up for me as the helper? We have to do that or it's madness. I'll close with this example. As a Black psychologist, I'm very clear that my psychology is in the service of my Blackness. Let me say it again, that my psychology, my science, my knowledge is in the service of my people. And in the service of my people, it's in the service of all of humanity. Because as people of African ancestry, Black folks, we have been dealing with seen and unseen pandemics since we met a certain group of people. Fill in the blank any way you want, listeners. But my point being this, Our job is to remind our people of that we've already come through. So when we cannot grieve the loss of our loved one during this pandemic in terms of being with their physical person, that's not the first time we've been denied the body of our loved one and we still had to honor their life. Come on now. So we have to remind our people about that so that we can re-engage. So as we honor them in this social distance engagement, we're not talking about a loss. We're talking in terms of, oh, it's not the same. I can't. No, I am more fully able to now sit with my brothers and sisters around the globe in this virtual space and honoring the passing of a loved one in ways in which the in-person did not allow us to do. I'm going to stop preaching right now again. I'm done.
Ethiopia, Juan, Kristen, this has been probably the most amazing Recovery Live event I've ever participated in. I am so grateful. We are a minute over what we normally do. Folks out there, a huge, massive thank you to Kristen, Ethiopia, and Juan. Listen, always remember, C4 here is waiting for any of your training or technical assistance needs. I want to thank you all for joining us on today's session. Thanks again to these amazing presenters. If that survey is not giving you trouble and you can fill it out, we're grateful for that because we really pay attention to it. And we will see you in October at the next Recovery Live event. Thank you all again. Have a fantastic day.